Today we have with us Yashashree Gurjar, CEO of Avantha Foundation and Vice President Group CSR, Avantha Group. Yashashree, thank you very much for joining us today. Yashashree, my first question to you is, what is business responsibility to Avantha Group?
Business responsibility to Avantha Group would mean embedding their business decisions in the social fabric of the country. So it would mean that if there's a new plant coming up, if there's a new business to be started, looking at how we can make a difference and impact to mitigate some of the issues or the negative impacts that we may cause, or whether intentionally or unintentionally. So map our footprint properly and be able to conduct the business. That is what business responsibility would mean. And I'll give you an example. When we started the power company that we have, it's a greenfield project. Even before the first piece of land could be acquired, the CSR team was in place, working with communities, trying to understand what their issues are, trying to understand where their pain points are, trying to understand how we can make their lives better after acquiring some of the land from them and not worse. So this is how deeply it is embedded in the Avantha Group.
Yashashree, one of the core businesses of the Avantha Group is paper manufacturing.
Yes.
And I would specifically like to ask you, what is the group doing to ensure that the raw materials are sourced responsibly and with minimum impact to our environment? So what processes and what innovations is Avantha leading there?
See, wood is one of the biggest raw material that is required in paper manufacturing, and we did realize many years back that we are not going to be able to access it from forests anymore. So really the only, and that's not just Balarpur, it's the paper companies, all paper companies as a whole can't now access forest wood anymore. So the only option that paper companies had was to grow it as farm wood and acquire it from farmers. But given that in India land is so fragmented and there is such an immense pressure on land for food, that we couldn't just take away farmers' food security and put it under pulpwood farming. So we have now got a system in place where we are looking at non-food land, which is within the possession of private farmers, which is not used for much in most of their, because it's arid, because it doesn't support, the soil doesn't support food production. We only pick up that kind of land from with the farmers, in collaboration with the farmers, and try and convince them to grow pulpwood on it. This is easier said than done, because farmers have got holdings that are small, like 1 acre and 1.5 acre, and so really reaching out farmer 1 acre at a time is a huge challenge. So we have then found a solution to that, and we tried to sort of collect them together and form a collective of farmers, so that it is easier to take collective action than to take individual farmers and take action. The other reason why a collective was also essential was that most of these small farmers are not creditworthy in the formal banking system, and growing pulpwood requires some amount of investment from the side of the farmer, which he has to pick up as a loan from the probably formal banking system or somebody who is ready to give him the loan at rates that will not drown him and burden him. So that's the other reason, that if you can't go to a bank, then how do you access credit for them? So we formed joint liability groups with these farmers. We formed a producer company with the farmers, as a consortium of joint liability groups, and that is working very well. Today almost 5,000 farmers are farming for pulpwood on their unused land with us, and have become a very, very invaluable part of our value chain. In the interim 5 years, we are with them, helping them to grow better crops on their food land, to help them diversify their incomes from farm sources into non-farm sources, and see whether they can lead better quality lives overall till they get this first produce from the crop, which is a 5-year gestation period.
Yashashree, from your experience, now there are a lot of companies that are newly setting up their CSR cells. So one of the biggest dilemmas that companies face is, how do they go about setting their CSR goals?
Yes.
So what would you recommend to these organizations? How could they meaningfully engage and with whom to be able to go ahead and set these goals?
See, the first advice I would give companies who are getting into CSR is to first understand who your stakeholders are. Because each company may define their stakeholders differently. To some, consumers may be very important. To some, suppliers may be very important. Depends upon which part of the business you come from. So really map your stakeholders. Understand what those stakeholders' aspirations are, from the company, and maybe try and work with them on those issues, rather than just picking up any issue that that is possibly required by, or somebody says it's fashionable to do as CSR. I don't think companies should operate it like that. First, they must look at what their stakeholders want and understand how they can contribute to that issue. That is not to say that they do everything. People have often asked me that if it is a consumer, then it's your business interest, then that cannot be CSR. And I would say to them that within what you give to suppliers or consumers as part of the business, I think the CSR component can be the value add, or the what you do beyond what you already do. That will constitute your CSR for that company. And I of course feel it's, if you have the money, there is always a cause for supporting an issue that's at the national level. So yes, education is a big issue for this country, skill development is a big issue, malnutrition is a big issue. So if companies can set aside some part of their CSR funds to support such issues, I think that will also go a long way.
Yashashree, one of the major areas of work in Avantha Foundation is about improving democratic governance. So we'd really want to know what is Avantha's intervention there?
Yes. As a foundation, we have taken up democratic governance as an issue. One of the things that we realized when we were working in our CSR in rural areas, because we are, by the nature of our business, we are in very remote areas. We realized that while doing CSR, one of the biggest issues why development doesn't reach the last man in the last hut is because there is a huge lack of governance. The elected representatives don't represent well enough for this person to actually get the benefit. And if there is transparency, there's good governance all around, I'm sure that there will not be a need for any of us to exist, in a manner of speaking. So we felt that if we can make a difference to make democratic governance more robust in this country. Because what happens typically is, just because you get elected, you don't necessarily know how to govern. I think it's a skill. I think like we build skills for other professions like engineering, like other professions. I think we need to build skills of people who want to be career politicians and who want to make a difference to this country. And so we need to look at this as an issue, very important. Yes, of the leaders, we are looking at it from the citizens' perspective. So we are also developing skills of citizens on engaging with their leaders, because it's just agitations cannot be engagement. One has to be able to know how to engage with your leader, your MLA, your MP, your corporator on the issues that you believe in. So even if it's a Mohalla Samiti, whether it's a citizens group that is looking at protection of environment, whether it's, we talk to them, we give them skills on how they can make their issue a priority agenda with their elected representative, because that is also the need of the hour. We are also working with young people, in college students, to get them more aware and involved in policy and decisions and policy issues of this country. So how does Parliament make decisions? How does your MLA, what are his roles and responsibilities? What is it that you can ask as questions to your politicians? I think the youth of this country also need to get more actively engaged in the democratic governance process, which they are not. We go there once in 5 years to vote and come back, but we are not engaged in the process of understanding it to the full extent.
New Companies Act, how do you see CSR processes evolving and changing at the Avantha Group? Do you see necessarily a difference there now that companies have a mandate in terms of spending a certain amount of money for CSR activities?
I don't think things are going to change much at Avantha, because at Avantha for the last 12-15 years, a decade and a half almost, we are doing this in the same way that has been outlined in the new Act. So at Avantha, things may not drastically change. Maybe some years we'll have more money, some years we'll have less money, but that also has never been a constraint for us. So we've always decided on what needs to be done and allocated money accordingly. Sometimes it's 2%, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. So we've never taken into account what percentage of the work of our money has been allocated to CSR, but it has always been need based and it is always given to us as per the needs. So I don't see much of a difference. I think the good thing is that now the responsibility rests with the board. So the board, the reporting will happen from the board perspective. Otherwise, in companies like Ballarpur, we were already reporting, our CSR and financial statements every year. For the last almost a decade, we are reporting it. So it is this. I don't see that there's such a drastic change.
Yashashree, my last question to you is, given that Avantha Group is a big group with so many different companies, so how do you go about coordinating your CSR programs with different companies? So is it a very centralized process where you first sit, with different companies and then decide what the CSR program is going to be for the group as a whole? Or is there, some kind of a decentralized process where at the center, perhaps you're just coordinating at the group level, but it is actually the companies who are deciding what they want to do?
The way we do it in our group is that what activities and what focus areas each company has to be decided by that company, because each one's footprint is different. It's different for Crompton, it's different from Power, it's different for Ballarpur. I can't tell them to do the same thing. Their stakeholders are different, their needs are different, their business aspirations are different. So the nitty-gritties are definitely decided at the operating level. The programs, the allocation of budgets, all that are decided at the business level. But there is definitely a clear policy strategy support that I provide, which means that I sit with companies, understand what their needs are, help them to arrive at something. Then they are on their own, they can decide how they want to take this. But they obviously cannot do something. See, it's not as if we lay down a mandate, but there is a clear understanding that we will not do donation-based CSR. Right. We will not do. So we will not encourage any company within our group to do that kind of stuff. We just give to charity and forget about it. We don't encourage that. We expect each company gets involved in what they are doing and takes it up as a long-term process as opposed to one event and a charity-based kind of a thing. So that's the amount of control that one has. The monitoring and evaluation control is there a little bit, because if you've decided this is what you want to do, then it has to be measured, and that measurement has to reflect as a group on what we do. And it helps, because when you aggregate, it gives you a good data to work on. Suppose there are two companies working on malnutrition, let's say. If both those companies aggregate their data, you can really show a difference that the group is making towards the issue, as opposed to each one talking about it separately.
Like you mentioned, monitoring and evaluation of what is being done, which in a way has to be fairly independent of the companies that are also executing those programs.
Sure.
So how do you ensure that your monitoring and evaluation is independent of the execution of the CSR programs?
The monitoring support is given by a team that is at the group level. Okay, but there is also an external monitoring or evaluation that happens. Okay. Monitoring is what you set targets, you want to achieve those targets, and the steps that you're taking to see whether it's all going in that direction. But the evaluation of what you have actually done in terms of the outputs and the impacts that you've been able to achieve are done by an external agency. Then we get in an external agency, let's say, because impact assessment is not something you can do in 1 or 2 years. It has to be a long-term thing. So maybe once in 5 years or so, we do get external people to come in and evaluate the work that we've done. The other important way in which we evaluate and monitor a project is take it back to the communities. So we have open forum discussions with communities that is done as an annual kind of a process with various stakeholders. Really, we literally sit across the communities in a central place where everyone's invited to pitch. So there is sometimes criticism, there's sometimes applaud, but they tell you what's...
There's direct feedback.
There's direct feedback. Absolutely. Initially, it used to be full of criticism. Now they've realized that if you give constructive suggestions, the company is willing to take it. Right. So the communities have moved from just openly criticizing to actually being partners in the development. In a lot of our units, the budgets, the way the projects have to progress is now all decided by community development councils that we have established in the communities themselves. So we don't take major decisions. The decisions are also taken with community-based organizations who actually implement the projects at the grassroots level.
Thank you so much, Yashashree, for your time. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.